Welcome to Homegrown, a Soccer Yank podcast, our home for domestic soccer. This is Jason Sierra, co-host and producer of Soccer Yanks. Rather than having our usual one episode a month show, in the month of February, we're going to examine the soccer media through interviews with several members of both the media and soccer historians. This first episode, I'm talking to Jonathan Tannenwald of Philly.com and Josh Hakala, best known for the Cup.us. So let's just jump right in, and this is my interview with Jonathan Tannenwald. I'm with Jonathan Tannenwald, soccer beat writer at Philly.com. How you doing, Jonathan?
I'm doing pretty well, thanks. How are you doing?
Great. And you're the goalkeeper on Twitter?
That's
if I'm not
right,
mistaken.
yeah.
Everyone should be familiar with your work. Even if you're not a Union fan, just your great work right now on the media soccer and what's going on with the TV contract. So let's kind of jump right into that angle first. Right now we have 3 channels going to be airing MLS games. Obviously, there's nothing nationally in terms of NPSL or USL Pro, but just kind of give me a sense what the landscape has changed over the last 5 years when it comes to TV and American domestic soccer.
Well, a couple of things have happened. One is there's just a lot of TV channels, and they're all looking for stuff to put on. And as soccer has become more popular, I mean, you think back to when NBCSN launched, MLS was one of their first properties because they needed something to put on. And so they put some money on the table, and they had more exposure than Fox. And MLS, in fact, turned down more money from Fox to go because NBC had greater exposure than Fox had at the time. Well, now Fox has the exposure, and MLS decided to go back to them. And it's a lot of money. It's $720 million over 8 years combined from ESPN, Fox, and Univision. Fox is going to try to make a big deal out of it on Fox Sports 1. We'll see if it works.
Now, the games look great, at least on NBC look great. ESPN does a really good job with their work. But I kind of want to get a sense of not just the actual games coverage and the production, but what you might think they might do in the way of actually covering the sport as journalists and actually doing their own original content when it comes to, I know ESPN has ESPN FC, which is a world thing, but do you think they're going to actually have something independent just for the MLS and just for U.S. soccer domestically?
I don't know that they should. I mean, look, it would be great to have a match of the day for MLS every Sunday night on one of the ESPNs or Fox. Univision is going to do something like that, and folks are going to have to brush up on their Spanish if they want to watch it, and maybe that's what people should do. I certainly wouldn't be against it if that's what people wanted to do. But look, soccer's not just one league. It's not just MLS. It's not just the English Premier League or the UEFA Champions League or the Bundesliga or the Mexican League or anything else. It's all these different things together, which is part of what makes it so great. And I think that there's every right to be okay with a show that treats MLS and gives it its due and then gives the Premier League its due and then does little bits and pieces of everything else like ESPN FC does. And, people are going to complain, MLS should be the lead story on ESPN FC. Well, look, they're not stupid. You look at the number of people who are watching the Premier League. You look at the number of people who are watching MLS. There's more people who are watching the Premier League. And honestly, there's a lot more people who are watching the next league than any of them. So MLS has its work cut out for it to build the TV ratings. They've always had that problem. And now they're really doing something with it by getting with some TV partners who are going to promote them well, who've given us some money to put on the table and spend on the players, not put in the owner's own pockets. Give money to the players. Go out and get the Michael Bradleys and the Clint Dempseys, but not just those guys, but some of the guys who are in Europe who are the middle class. They help raise sort of the middle class of the league. They're better Americans. They're more South Americans. They're more Europeans. That's not just going to be a bunch of guys who can't make it in Europe, a bunch of guys who are raising the level of Major League Soccer and want to play here.
Kind of agree with you when it comes to there is so much elements of the sport that we do have to have little bits and pieces here and there. I just, for me, and I think for you as a beat writer, I notice that there's a lack of MLS coverage in general. That there's a lack of anything else coming outside of the coming outside of MLSsoccer.com. And you work for Philly.com, which has connections to both the Enquirer and Newsday. But a lot of establishments.
Sorry,
you're right. Daily, yep. So there's a lot of established media that doesn't even pay attention to soccer. For my example, my neck of the woods being in New Jersey, the Star-Ledger got rid of their soccer beat writer. So the Star-Ledger, which is 15 minutes away from Red Bull Arena, doesn't even have a beat writer covering the team on its own. Do you think that that's an issue, that there's not an establishment other than just blogs or MLS Soccer really covering the league?
Oh, it's an issue. Absolutely. I mean, I'll take it bigger than the Newark Star-Ledger because at least to their credit, they had a guy in Frank Giassi who covered the Red Bulls really well for years. You know, they're bleeding money and all. I'm not going to get into their financial problems, but take it bigger than that. The Philadelphia Inquirer, the Boston Globe, the Dallas Morning News, the Chicago Tribune, the Denver Post. None of them have soccer beat writers. That's about as big as it gets, you know? And look, part of it is that some of those, the editors who make the decisions, don't have the vision to see the fan base for soccer. And I have that complaint out with a lot of people, and sometimes I get yelled back at me, you know, that I don't know what I'm talking about. And it's my argument to have with people. But look, a lot of these newspapers that are losing so much money, they go with what they know. And they really have to be convinced to do something that might be out of their comfort zone. And soccer's a little bit out of their comfort zone. You want to talk about horse racing or college football or baseball or the NFL, they're good. But you want to talk to them about soccer, they don't quite get it, and they don't see the audience, even though the audience is out there. But again, this is another thing where television ratings matter. Because MLS's TV ratings just aren't that great, so there's nothing to prove what the audience is, and that's what's got to really change this year.
So let me think about this right now in a second. 'Cause I know everyone, at least in the English part of this country, thinks about MLS in the sense of ESPN and Fox. And you said League MX is the biggest viewership in this country. How critical do you think Univision is? And that's, I believe, it's a Friday night game they're going to have on Univision.
Enormous.
You think
I'm not going to say more important than ESPN or Fox, but absolutely fair to say equally important to ESPN or Fox. And people have got to be able to step back and think about that. Because if you go down to Houston or Dallas or Los Angeles, people aren't talking about the English Premier League the way they are where you and I are on the East Coast. They're talking about the Mexican League. You want MLS teams to be able to compete financially and in the CONCACAF Champions League on the field with Mexican players. The fact that Univision wants to do this is a big deal. Because for a long time they didn't. And they do now, and MLS has got to take advantage of that. And that means if Univision puts on the table, we want to broadcast our own games in our own time slots, we're going to produce them, and we want people to learn Spanish a little bit, but we're also going to do a secondary audio feed in English so that there's not the local broadcast at the same time. Then give it to them. Because if you think about it in the past, the games that were on Univision's channels were broadcast locally in English in the markets, especially the home, because the home team had to produce the broadcast and send it to Univision, so it had to be televised locally in the market. You know what I mean? So now Univision is going to be producing its own games. So it's not going to be a local market broadcast anymore. And the announcer is going to be in the arena instead of in the studio in Miami. It's going to be their production trucks and all that. And yeah, maybe it's time for some folks to learn a little bit of Spanish. Might not be the
So
worst
they're making a severe financial commitment to MLS on the Univision side.
Absolutely.
Now, I don't want to go off a little bit, but I think every time I think about Univision, I think about this connection with Miami and the need or the desire for MLS to be in Miami. Do you think that?
You said need, and you're
Because
correct.
they have their operations in Miami, if I'm not mistaken.
And not just them. Telemundo, beIN Sport, Gold TV. You got all the big Latin American banks that have the headquarters down there. It's a lot of money. And I do think that MLS needs to be in Miami so that it can tap into that. Now, look, MLS needs to be in Miami, I think, in general. But as we know, it failed once already there. The circumstances have got to be really right. And they can't go in unless they're really going to get it right. And once they do, they've got to nail it, and that's why they're being so cautious about Beckham and where they put that stadium and all that.
Yeah, when the more you talk about the Univision thing and the more that the Beckham thing hangs around, I think people have to kind of look past the image of their fan base and the image of the Heat and everything else that's been dealing with that sports culture for such a long time and realize that this is really a big financial deal. This is probably as big financially as than NYCFC coming in New York City.
Here's what we don't know about Miami. What we don't know is whether the soccer fan base might actually turn up a little more than the baseball fan base and the football fan base and the basketball fan base. Because if we're honest, the soccer fan base is a little bit of a different demographic. And who knows? You know, if the stadium's stuck in the suburbs, nobody's going to go. But if they can get it in the city, I think it might work.
You know, there's so much soccer on TV. MLS isn't even the biggest league, but it's even the third most watched league in this country.
I think that's probably right, number 3. Yeah.
Do you think personally that is a hindrance to have so much soccer that's distracting from the MLS, or is it growing the pot?
There's people who think that, and unfortunately, Major League Soccer Commissioner Don Garber is one of the people who think that. I don't think that, because what we've seen is some of the most watched MLS games ever have been doubleheaders with the Premier League on NBC or doubleheaders with the Euros or the World Cup and whatever on ESPN. I think MLS benefits from that because it brings it to the attention of people who maybe weren't paying attention otherwise. Here's something to think about in terms of the television audience for MLS and why I think it's got the potential to jump this year. The NBCSN would have a game on Saturday night. Not always, but sometimes. Say that game's at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night. How many other games are going on at the same time? 4? 5? So there's 20,000 people in each of those stadiums. Times 5 is 100,000. Add 20,000, in the visiting market who are watching TV. So that's 200,000. That's probably more than that when all is said and done. That's the audience for an MLS national TV broadcast now. So by clearing the decks and making sure that there's not any other MLS games going on during these national TV broadcasts, as is going to be the case this year, you have the opportunity to double the audience right off the bat. And it tells you that MLS has been wasting an opportunity all this time by not forcing its owners to not play games during the national TV slots because they all want to play games on Saturday night. And they finally got it out. ESPN and Fox said, we're going to put $720 million on your table. And one of the things you're going to give us, if you really want that money, is exclusive time slots and no other games during a national TV broadcast. And they finally got it.
Yeah, that's the one thing that people kind of forget when people think about the sports numbers. Look at NFL and there's Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football. Those are exclusive slots. Even the NBA with TNT on Thursday night, those are exclusive slots. There usually be one early Thursday night game. Those are garbage games.
Even the 4 o'clock Sunday NFL game
right.
is close.
Right. So they're doing what everybody else does. It's just that they're finally doing it. They're finally doing it to their advantage.
20 years, it's what everybody else is doing. Now you're in North Jersey,
yes, I am.
right? You got a Red Bulls game on and another national TV game on at the same time. Which one are you watching?
Red Bulls. Or I'm at the Red Bulls game, but we'll, depending.
Just answer your own question. I'm at the Union game because I'm working. Minus another one. Multiply that by however many. It's a big deal.
So I think the next question is, what is the likelihood, if you heard anything, I know it's not in your market, I know it's not in your area, but getting those second-tier games on or even getting more U.S. Open Cup games on TV?
You mean like the NASL?
Like the NASL, maybe having the Red Bulls have Red Bulls 2, maybe they have an agreement with MSG or something similar.
Well, I don't think the demand is there yet, and I don't think the demand is there for the U.S. Open Cup yet either. You can try to create some, but in all honesty, it's just not. Look, I love the Open Cup. I've been a big fan and a follower of the sport of the Open Cup for a long time, but the demand is not there. It's only just started to get there in the last year or two. People will watch the final because it's the final, but they're not going to watch the earlier rounds, especially if you can't put up a proper television broadcast at some of the smaller stadiums, which you can't. And I mean a real, not just a couple of cameras, but a real serious national TV broadcast. In time, Maybe. But for now, the audience is such that I think the right way to do it is to do what they're doing now, which is stream all the games online, especially the USL. There's some really smart people at the USL. And the USL decided last year or the year before, I forget which, we're going to put all our games free of charge on YouTube. 2 or 3 cameras, a scoreboard, send everybody around the same graphics package so that it looks nice. Easy. And it's right there. It's for everybody. And then at around the same time, the NASL decided we're going to charge people $5 a month. Along came the USL Pro free of charge. Download the NASL on the toilet. In terms of streaming. Nobody's going to pay $5 a month even. The NASL got smart about it. They're going to be free of charge this year, which is good. But you got to build the demand first, and I think the easiest way to do it is to have that access. Everybody say it's on YouTube, it's there. Have it. It's yours. And it just goes,
Yeah, I popped in a couple of USL games from time to time, and the quality is the quality of both the production and the players, but it's good, if you're interested in soccer and you're interested in that next level guy or whatever, it is good to watch. It's good to just be part of it.
It's a niche audience, but now you got all these, the second teams like New York and Seattle and Portland and all that, and Toronto and so forth. I think there's going to be a lot of interest in the USL this year because you're really going to see where the MLS team is developing the next generation guys. You're still not going to get, 400,000 or 500,000 people. But you get a couple thousand of the diehards. And, making it easy to access free of charge, that's going to help.
To kind of stick on the internet here, having so many national games on TV, plus your local package, is there a reason anymore, you think, for MLS or anybody to really charge for MLS Live or some kind of MLS total package?
Yes. Yeah, it is. The satellite transmission costs, put it all together, do cost money. And you think your game on ESPN is free of charge until you get your cable bill in the mail.
Right.
Not free of charge.
No, it's... What are you up to? Like $5 now almost a month?
At least.
Yeah.
Look, to me, people complain, look, MLS Live went up $12 this year. Percentage-wise, it's a lot. But $65 for the year for 200 some odd games is a pretty good deal relative to how much the Major League Baseball and the NBA and the NHL charge.
And not to make an advertisement for MLS Live, but I personally enjoy the consolidated games where you get everything in half an hour.
I've been an MLS Live subscriber almost since year one. Look, I was hoping, ESPN bought all the rights to the out-of-market broadcasts on MLS this year. The goal, the hope, what they were going to put them on ESPN3 like they do for the ACC basketball and the SEC football and all that. They couldn't quite put it all together because they were also going to do a paid subscription package for people who didn't have ESPN3, and they just couldn't make all the details work right. I feel kind of bad for them. There's a lot of people who feel deceived. I sympathize with them, but, you can't just snap your fingers and make it happen. I wish you could. I hope next year it gets worked out right. But the only thing I wish they do with MLS Live, the only thing I change is I wish they'd have a home and away broadcast. Other than that, thing works pretty darn well. And $65 relative to the other streaming packages out there, you pay a lot more for a lot of other streaming packages.
All right, so this has been great. We talk about TV and everything, but let's talk a little bit about your experience being a soccer beat writer and just kind of what you want to see in the future for soccer writing. And we talked a little bit about editors being resistant to the sport, but how is it for you to cover the Philadelphia Union with even though you're not in a newspaper regularly, but you're in Philly.com, you're an established writer. How easy is it to get that access to deal with them?
I'm lucky for a couple reasons. One is that I started covering soccer before I got to Philly.com, so when I moved to Philadelphia and there wasn't a soccer team, I still kept up a couple of connections here and there. I was able to use them to get back in the game when the Union got launched. I'm also lucky because the way that Philly.com's editorial staff is structured, I have a lot of creativity and leeway. I have a lot more than a lot of other people who do who are just straight newspaper beat guys. So I can sort of craft my own my own schedule, my own list of games that I want to cover, whatever else. I'm very, very, very lucky in that regard. So I'm not the norm per se. I don't have a travel budget the way some other beat guys do, but on the whole, I'm very fortunate. In terms of what I want to see, look, I've been banging the drum for transparency in MLS for a long time. I'll continue to do so. The truth will set you free, as the old saying goes, and will help MLS, not hurt them. I've told so many people up there, and look, I get along really well with their PR staff. I know the commissioner and some of the other deputies up there. I've said them all on. They can do it. They can jump off that cliff and they'll be all right. They're not going to get hurt. There's things that they can do that are not going to blow up the single entity structure, that are not going to blow up the smart financial management that they've had over the years, but that are going to make the league better and stop a lot of this criticism that people have. That said, when I travel around and I talk to people, especially writers who come to MLS having read about the Premier League or whatever, I tell people, I don't over-glorify MLS for what it is, and I don't bash them over the head incessantly for what it's not. Have an understanding that no, MLS is not the Premier League, but there's smart people running it. They've done a lot of things right. Call them out on the things they've done wrong. Call them out on the things they do wrong. And call them out strongly, because once you have their respect, they listen to you. But don't go around saying, oh, MLS is inherently inferior. You want to talk about the problems with MLS, fine. You want to talk about things like what I like to say is, you can tell me anything you want about what MLS isn't. I probably agree with you. But don't tell me what MLS can't be. There's a big difference there,
Yeah, I understand. I hear you, and that's a lot of the fans' issues and with the game.
It's the media too, because they watch the Premier League and say, "Oh, it's better than MLS."
I used to watch a team in the lower ranks of the Premier League, and it's not that much better. It really the quality that much different.
Oh. Passing the ball down the field.
Yeah. Clearly, Barcelona and all these other high-level Champions League teams are at a different level between everybody else in the world. But MLS is as good as your regular Newcastle and Sunderland. I think I'd rather watch Sporting Kansas City versus.
Rather watch Josie Altidore playing in Toronto.
I would.
Sunderland, would you? Here's the other thing that MLS has, and everybody knows MLS has them. But at a certain point, it doesn't matter, and it's why a market like Philadelphia, they've been as successful as they have been, even though sort of the luck started to fade. You can watch Man United and Barcelona and Chivas and Boca Juniors and Bayern Munich and whatever else on the weekend, all you want. But you cannot go to Manchester and Munich and Mexico City and everywhere else every weekend. Certainly you and I can't. We don't have that kind. You can go to your local MLS stadium. And the teams that do it right, Sporting Kansas City, Salt Lake, Portland, the Red Bulls have started to do this in the last couple of years, although at times you feel like they've done it almost inadvertently. And certainly Philadelphia is a classic market like this. Nobody in Philadelphia wants to root, never mind for a team in London. They don't want to root for a team in New York. They want to root for a Philadelphia team. But teams that do this right get out in their own communities, develop a fan base that has an attachment and says, I live here, this is my team. And you can go to the bar every Saturday morning with an Arsenal jersey and a scarf, but it's not yours. You're borrowing it.
Yeah, it's whenever I take anybody, I have Red Bulls tickets. Whenever I take anyone to the game, they're floored by the atmosphere, and they say there's nothing else close to it other than SEC college football.
Yeah, you walk. Maybe if Rutgers or Seton Hall was any good, it would help. But in a Red Bull Arena, it's fabulous. That Eastern Conference final game against New England, everybody, even those of us who've been covering MLS for a long time, that was one of the great spectacles, atmospheres, all of it, in the entire history of Major League Soccer. I tell you what, when City goes to Red Bull Arena in May, it's a game of the year in Major League Soccer. All the turmoil they've been through, all that, I know. I know Red Bulls aren't going to have any stars this year or whatever, but when City goes to Red Bull Arena, it's going to be a full house, and they're going to blow the roof off.
I'm just hoping it doesn't turn out to be one of those when Knicks came to New Jersey, or when the Rangers come to New Jersey. It's not a 40-60 or a worst 50-50 crowd. I hope it is a Red Bull crowd.
I hope it's loyal. It's different because you got the Red Bulls playing the role of the Knicks. And look, if City had its own stadium, it was just the biggest deal when the Red Bulls blown up there. But being in Yankee Stadium is not the same.
No, I've soccer games there, and it's there's very few good seats.
It's too big, They were playing in a 25,000 seat stadium, and the first game for the City and the Red Bulls was there. Yeah, it'd be just as big a deal. But Red Bull, again, what it is, and the fact it's going to host the first game, it's going to be one of the games of the year in Major League Soccer.
One last question for you before I let you go. I think I answered this question something like this earlier, but I kind of want to maybe give a little more definition to it. Do you think that we will be able to get more transparency, that we'll be able to get more of what you talked about and what a lot of people are asking for, if, for example, ESPN goes out and hires themselves proper soccer writers who would transparency cover this?
They've got them already.
I'm sorry. People who go on TV regularly. Because also, you're right. I don't want to sit here and
they got one of those two on TV.
Talk
Taylor Twellman and Alejandro Moreno's the same way.
Well, those guys are analysts. Those aren't really journalists. I mean,
the amount of news Twellman's breaking these days, he sure is a journalist. But he's done. And this is the answer. The entity that has to do it is the Players Union and the CBA talks that are going on right now. That's where you fix it. And the problem is that until recently, all we ever heard out of the Players Union was we want free agents, we want free agents, we want free agents. Well, what's free agency? You got to define it. The Players Union, even though they have all the fans on their side, their PR has not been that good. And you don't start doing that once the bargaining negotiations are going on. You do it before then, and then you shut the door and figure it out, The Players Union takes a lot of the blame in this because they should have been leading the charge for transparency all along. They haven't been.
Yeah, and I think if Jermaine Jones would have came out and said, when he the blind draw, he goes, I'm not saying I don't want to play for New England, but saying I don't like them. I think that would have raised a few eyebrows.
It sure would have, but it wouldn't matter.
It wouldn't matter, but I think the next guy who says, I don't want this process coming in, you're right. There needs.
Josie said it. Look, anyway, but the Players Union can put it. Look, yes, MLS can loosen the reins on some of the stuff sort of by fiat whenever it likes. But the Players Union can go in the bargaining room and say, put this in the CBA. A CBA in professional sports can be as long-tailed as anybody wants, and it should be. How do the reserve leagues work? Who's of the reserve players are in the union or not? That's going to be a big question. What's the trade arrangements? What's the minimum wage? What's the salary cap? Can we get? You should be able to get rid of the allocation system by collective bargaining if you make it a priority. The Players Union has not made it a priority.
You're right, and I actually wish there was more coverage on this. And to say not just coverage online, because I think there's good coverage online, but I think I wish there was more coverage on, for example, ESPN, Fox, and NBC. I think that would give a lot more attention because people just don't have the access or the time or the means or whatever you want to say to go and look for this stuff online all the time.
And some of us who work in the mainstream media, look, I'm not a soccer writer for a living. In the States, the Canadian guys who cover soccer is a beat, but in the States, it's probably count on one hand guys who only cover soccer. All the rest we cover college basketball, high schools, or whatever else. So a lot of us don't have time to sit down and spend the week on the phone and not write anything, and then come back and have a big feature story.
Yeah. All right. I think we're gonna leave it there. I think there's a lot of stuff to think about. And you provide a lot of great information. Thank you so much. We're here with Josh Hakala. It's actually your return guest. You were here before talking about the U.S. Open Cup. He runs the cup.us, as well as you are a broadcaster on the Big Ten Network?
Yeah, I do a little bit of everything. I've been on a little bit of a Twins hiatus. Maybe a handful of your listeners might know that when you have twins, your life kind of changes drastically. So I'm just now getting back to doing play-by-play and doing different broadcasting things. And so So I'm kind of doing basketball play-by-play at the moment, being that it's not American soccer season. So it's good. It's good to be back behind the mic again.
Yeah, I could imagine. I have my partner and co-host Dan. He has 2 kids, and every time, whenever his kids were born, it was a really difficult time for him to find time. I'm expecting my first soon, so I know I'm going to have a hard time putting everything together. You're interesting, and I think you're kind of similar to a lot of people where you have a full-time job. Your job is broadcasting. You're also a reporter, or you were a reporter at least, but you also have a passion project, which is the U.S. Open Cup website. Talk a little bit about trying to maintain these outside interests of the website, as well as keeping your job and your family and everything together.
It's definitely a challenge. I won't say that it isn't, but it was kind of a situation where when you're in sports broadcasting and sports journalism too, you really have to find a niche in order to have yourself stand out a little bit. And I just found that in the Open Cup when I went to my first game, and I think it was 1999. I think was my first Open Cup game when I saw the Mid-Michigan Bucks of the PDL give the Tampa Bay Mutiny all they could handle at a middle school soccer field in Saginaw, Michigan, which was kind of great. Seeing somebody like Carlos Valderrama playing at a middle school field was kind of mind blowing to me. So when I found that and I realized that nobody was really covering it on a mass scale, I just thought, it has to be done. Somebody's got to do it. And so I started doing it just on we did it on the side. We were kind of just updating scores and doing different things like that and trying to put a few history items up there. But it turned into, once we realized that there was really kind of a need for it, and, there would be games that would be postponed and nobody would know about it, and so we would have to try to keep up with this stuff. And so more and more time was put into it, and it became more and more of a challenge to do that. And we've really just, as the years went on, started to put more and more time and effort into it. And now we're at the point now where we're going to try to have it be profitable enterprise where we actually are able to pay people to contribute to the site, and fingers crossed, maybe I will get paid a little bit. It's been great. We've had so many great volunteers over the years that have really made this possible, and we're hoping that can step it up a little bit, maybe add a podcast to it again, which is where it started out in the first place, and we'll see where it goes. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge to balance all those things. But when you're in this business, you have to find your niche, and you really have to put a lot of time into it, and that's what I've been trying to do.
You have been in sports and sports broadcasting since almost 15 years now, not counting even the site, but just general sports broadcasting. And we'll go back to the site a little bit because there's an element in there that I want to talk about, but I want to kind of go over your career more. Obviously, you talked about doing college basketball. In all your other sports jobs, how much were you able to cover soccer, if at all?
It was pretty balanced, I would say. My first real professional broadcast was an MLS game, but it actually came about because of the Open Cup site. The first time I was actually paid to do a broadcast. So, I had done I went to Lansing Community College in Michigan, and we got to do a lot of things. They let us kind of run rampant. We were just able to, you want to do basketball, go do basketball. You want to do softball, go for it. They would just let us do whatever we wanted, which was great because you got all the experience you needed. And then eventually, when we started the show and then started the site, I had all this equipment, this broadcasting equipment, and I knew how to broadcast the game. And I remember, I think the first game that I did, I had Peter Wilt on the show a couple of times, and we developed a little relationship there. And there was a game against Milwaukee Wave United, and they were having an Open Cup game, and I was like, "You're not broadcasting the game. Can I do it?" And he's like, "Sure." And so I drove from Lansing to Milwaukee, and I set up shop, and I broadcasted the game, and that was my first. I don't remember how much I got paid for it, but I don't think it was very much. But it was still my first step into it. So that once you get in the door and you start developing relationships, it leads to more and more things, and And most of it, unfortunately, in this business, it's more about who you know than what you know, which is kind of sad, but it's true. And I think almost all of the jobs that I've gotten have been through somebody making a recommendation or something. So it's good that, and luckily you can be good at it to begin with, because I guess if somebody recommends you and then you're terrible, then that doesn't usually work out all that well. So look, it's worked out for me okay.
So you really made a career out of almost working or broadcasting soccer or covering soccer and I don't say this with any kind of disrespect, but almost the niche parts of soccer, the U.S. Open Cup, the Women's Soccer League, the Indoor Soccer League, the fourth division. You kind of found your way in by really taking the less traveled roads, or finding the, like I like to say, finding the market inefficiencies in the sport.
Yeah, it's really the challenge that I've always had has been the availability of teams near me. So in Lansing, we didn't have any teams nearby. There was a PDL team there for like a year, and it was so poorly advertised that it was literally playing in a high school field a couple miles away from where I lived, and I didn't know it was happening. And that seemed really absurd for somebody who follows soccer as closely as I do, and I didn't know there was a PDL team in my neighborhood. So they didn't last very long. The only option I had was the Michigan Bucks, who were in the Detroit area. They were originally in the Saginaw area, which is a little north of there. And so it's really just trying to find opportunities, like in your area. I mean, once you're starting out, you have to just take whatever you can get. And that was kind of what I did. It just trying to find games and just get reps in, develop relationships, and that's that's what I did with the Bucks. We did like their whole 2003 season, which actually included a couple of Open Cup games, which was kind of cool. They played the Metro Stars, and that was a pretty great event. It's just, you just got to kind of find some places nearby and go for it. And the trouble is, there's not always, depending on where you live, there might not be a lot of opportunities out there. So you might have to start really small. Like maybe you do, I don't know, like neighborhood softball games or something. I don't know, whatever you need to do. And that's kind of what I've done. And then with doing TV, when you're starting out, you just take whatever they'll give you and just take it and run with it. And then I think one of my first Big Ten Network games was they called me up and they said, "Have you ever done field hockey before?" And usually I just lie and say, "Sure, no problem." But field hockey, I know the basic idea. You score goals, and but I really didn't know any of the rules. Like I couldn't give you any analysis on field hockey. Didn't feel like I could lie about this one. I was like, I have to be honest, I've never done field hockey before. And I thought maybe I hate to tell people no, but I was like, I hate to tell this guy no, but I'm going to have to be honest. And he was like, you know what? No one's done field hockey. You'll be great. He signed me up for it anyway, and I spent 2 weeks doing a crash course, learning everything I could, and luckily I had a brilliant color commentator who knew the game inside and out. So it all worked out in the end, but it was very nerve-wracking to do a sport that I've never done before. So, but when you're starting out, you just got to do it, and you get that experience and get those reps in.
When it comes to college sports, I've actually found listening to some college soccer games that I've listened to people who have no clue about college soccer. So I'm sure you'll be, if you can't find someone to cover field hockey, I'm sure it's a lot more common than finding someone who wants to talk 30 minutes about hockey, than talk about the soccer game that's being broadcast online. But you're in a couple different things. Do you think you'll ever get to a point where you're in your career where you're just focusing on soccer only, where you're just focusing only on being able to broadcast soccer games, being able to do your site, or do you think you're always going to have to, or always want to have these other sports elements in your life?
I would love to do that. I would think that. I mean, it would be so great to just do what normal people do and just have one job and just do that. But I have so many interests, and I wear so many hats that it's not very realistic for me. I think that I will always find time to do something else. Like I to my detriment, I've almost like signed up for too many things. And, I was the communications director for the North American Soccer Reporters for a while. And just, I have a hard time saying no to things, but if there's a way for me to do just soccer, that would be great. But I would be perfectly happy to do other things too. I mean, I love soccer, but I aside from NASCAR, I love all the other sports too. So I think the variety would be helpful. I don't know if I'd want to do it like 24 hours a day, but it would be nice to sort of minimize things a little bit. If there was a way for me to make the Cup.us into a full-time gig, that would be ideal. But I kind of need a business person to help me out with that, because that, of all the things that I can do, doing sales and doing the business side of things, not exactly my strong suit. So that's kind of my priority right now, is finding someone like that to help me out with that.
So let's get back to the site again. I believe we first talked about this, talked about the Open Cup final. I think I mentioned that I worked for you covering one of the games, and I got my first opportunity covering soccer games through the Cup.us site, and now I cover college soccer games on a regular basis, almost the same format where it's very low tech, no replay cameras, limited access. So for me, it was a great experience, and I'm sure your website at least, launched a couple of people's interest in covering the sport. But you've done it for such a long time. Can you talk a little bit about the articles you read and the information you get? Do you think it has improved? Do you think the knowledge of the game has improved from the general person who's interested in writing? Have you seen progression?
Yeah, I think people have it's definitely developed over the years, and more people. It's becoming more of a mainstream sport. It's not fully mainstream yet, but it's on the brink of it. We're definitely the fifth major sport, if you want to call it that. So I've seen a lot of coverage that's developed, and I think a lot of people have taken upon themselves to do it themselves and start their own blogs and things like that. And there's been a lot of people, and technology has certainly helped that. So it's been great, and people like yourself and who have taken my cries for help to covering games and helped me out. There are a lot of people who have sort of taken that and like, maybe I could do this. And that's kind of how people start out, is you take that freelance gig that it seems like you could do, but you maybe haven't done it before, and just as long as people are there to help you through it, then that's how you get started. So I've seen a lot of people start out that way. There's been, my co-host on the radio show, when this whole thing started, I just put out a blind cry for help on a message board, and turns out he lived in the same city, and he was, where was he working? He was working at like one of the stores that, for construction sites, like they need equipment for that, and like signs and orange cones and stuff like that. I think he worked at a store like that, but he was a sports guy, and he was a writer, and through doing our show, I was like, you could totally do this. Like, you have the skills to do it. And then it turned around, like a couple of years later, he was writing for the Lansing State Journal and covering high school sports and starting out, and he's an exceptional writer. So he's gotten a lot of attention for that. So that's been good. So it's been good to see people take soccer and make it more of a mainstream sport, where we're not, having the same discussions about maybe we should make the goal bigger, or there's too much passing back and forth. It's actually people know the sport a lot better. So it's kind of nice to see.
And you're talking about your site and the business aspect of it. And how long has your site been around for? Is it 15 years now?
2003. So I guess this is our 12th year or 13th year, if I'm doing my math. Yeah. So.
Okay. Within the soccer community, it's a successful site. It's a well-known site. And you said you don't have business acumen to get the site really profitable and really going. But how difficult is it to run an own site, putting out your own money, hoping that one day it will at least be somewhat profitable, where you can, or even at least sustaining, where you can actually maybe travel to a game yourself and maybe cover a game on your own away from your home.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that because I have not done that. Like, there have been games in Detroit. I live in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is 45 minutes from Detroit, and there were 2 Open Cup games last year in the Detroit area, and I didn't make it to either one because I have a site to run, and I have a job, and I have kids and stuff. So I haven't been to an Open Cup final since the site started. The last Open Cup final I went to was 2002 when the Columbus Crew beat the Galaxy at Crew Stadium. And that was sort of nearby, and I was able to get to that one. So yeah, it's been a pretty limited situation for me as far as time, because someone's got to run the site, and I have some people to help, but it's a lot to do, and if I take myself out of the equation, that's a big gap. So maybe I can find some more people for that. But yeah, it's challenging too. As far as the business aspect of it, if you have those skills, then you're set. If you have the ability to do sales, but the problem with sales is it takes, selling ads and coming up with revenue streams and things like that takes time, and I have very little of that. So it's really, I've kind of come to the realization that I just need to find someone else to do it. So I don't have, talking to people, having meetings, selling them on the idea of, we're a national site, people from all over the country come to our site to check it out, and it's just something I don't have the time to do. I could sell you on it, but also I just don't know the business of selling ads. It's just not something that's natural to me. So it's definitely something I'm going to have to get some help on.
So before we kind of go past this conversation, talk to me a little bit about your just general opinion. The soccer media and the coverage of, not just the coverage on the mainstream sports, we know obviously they got better, they got more professional, they got more serious. Fox and ESPN actually treats soccer like a serious sport, but just your general overall opinion about the way the direction it's going for professionals more than just people watching the games on TV.
I think there's definitely more opportunities because of the fact that the networks and some of the media outlets are seeing the progress of the sport, and they're seeing that this is the future for them. I mean, this has potential to grow even further because, like my son is going to grow up in a world where professional soccer in this country is just normal. It's always there. And when I was a kid, the only thing that you ever saw on TV was a replay of an English Premier League match at an odd hour of the morning, and you weren't really sure if it was live or when it took place or what's really going on. But hey, it was soccer, so I guess you're okay with it. But there was just nothing when I was a kid. So the World Cup would come around, and there'd be some games on TV, but it's just changed so much. And so there's this whole generation of people who are going to grow up, and soccer is just one of their sports. They can play soccer and actually look to emulate professional players that they can see on TV. And so it's I think the networks and the media outlets out there have seen that and are starting to invest a little bit more in covering the sport. So we're seeing a lot more coverage and better coverage, and I think it's really gotten a lot better. And we even have some of the things that other sports have, like mock drafts, which are absurd in their concept of wildly educated guesses that are almost never accurate, but yet people eat it up because they like to speculate. And so we've started to arrive in that respect because wild speculation is fun and it stretches across all sports. It's definitely fun to see things develop as they have, and it'll only get better as time goes on.
As someone who did a mock draft for a website, I'm telling you, it is. I think I talked about this on the past broadcast. It was pretty absurd to even see what the actually I put in research. I put in time to see who played where, who played for what PDL team, who played for what academy, who was from what area. All this research and time put in, and it was not even close. I mean, as educated a guess I could have put together, what I had was not even close, and I wasn't the only one. There's a lot more well-informed people than I am who whiffed on a lot of these mock drafts as well.
Right. I mean, it was. I don't like to mock people for them because it's hard, and I wouldn't do any better at it. But it was just funny to see some of the tweets like, "This player is going to be a top 10 pick," and he's like, late in the second round or third round or something. And like it's just so soccer is just such a harder sport to predict, and with the way that scouting is and the way the college system is, I mean, we had an NAIA player like bouncing around the first and second round. I mean, no one's going to think to scout the NAIA like as a mock draft person. Like you might. I mean, all you're going to do is see them at the combine. I mean, like, what else are you? No one's going to be checking out Davenport University games and things like that. So there's a lot of there's a lot that needs to more and more games are online. Maybe we'll see more accuracy with it, but teams are difficult to predict. There's so many positions, and now with the addition of all these reserve teams with the USL Pro system and that MLS is doing, it's hard to know whether they're going to be drafting players for the first team, or maybe they'll draft a guy and he's kind of a project and they'll project him to be on the USL Pro team. So you don't really know what direction they're going to get. So, but it's fun to see that we've taken up that sports tradition in the media.
There's some American sports things that just don't go away and that are fun, like the mock draft. And like you said, the USL Pro thing is definitely an interesting prospect in the change of the soccer community and the soccer world, and it means more jobs for writers, and it means more jobs for people who want to be in soccer.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, I just want to thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, it was good talking to you. Anytime.
Thanks. Ole, ole.